Imagine a tranquil pond in the first light of day. The water's surface is a sheet of green, a blanket woven from something so tiny it would escape your notice entirely if you weren't searching for it. Now, observe that same pond 48 hours later. The green has doubled. Every last speck has replicated itself. After another 48 hours, the mass doubles once more. And again, and again. This is not an algal bloom. This is not common pond scum. This is the planet's most rapidly multiplying source of protein. And for 6 decades, the industrial fertilizer complex has worked to make certain you would never know it exists. Let us examine the evidence. Inside a laboratory at Ben-Gurion University, in 2018, scientists conducted a clinical trial to evaluate 3 distinct protein sources: soft cheese, green peas, and a plant that was completely unknown to most of the study's subjects. They provided 36 men with identical portions, containing 30 grams of protein each, and then monitored their blood every hour for the next 3 hours. The results were unequivocal. The plant surpassed the cheese. Blood concentrations of essential amino acids surged to greater heights. Levels of vitamin B12 rose more significantly than with either the cheese or the peas. The final digestibility score reached 89%, a figure that rivals animal-based proteins. The plant under examination weighs less than a single grain of sand. Its scientific name is Wolffia globosa. In Thailand, it is known as Kai Nam, which translates to eggs of the water. In the West, if it is known at all, it is dismissed as duckweed, and its story is poised to dismantle everything you believe about how we nourish our world. This is an investigation into nature's forgotten vault. Let us begin with the fundamental nature of this plant. Wolffia globosa holds the distinction of being the smallest flowering plant on Earth. A single organism measures less than 1 millimeter across, smaller than the head of a pin. It possesses no roots and no conventional leaves. It is merely a microscopic green sphere, floating on the surface of still water. It propagates every 29 to 48 hours, budding off identical daughter plants. In optimal growing conditions, Wolffia's dry weight is composed of up to 45% protein. That figure is superior to soybeans at 36%, superior to quinoa at 14%, and superior to beef at 26%. But this is where the investigation deepens. This is not the incomplete plant protein, deficient in essential amino acids, that defines most vegetables. According to a study published in the journal Clinical Nutrition in 2018, Wolffia globosa possesses all 9 essential amino acids in concentrations that satisfy the recommendations of the World Health Organization. The protein quality score is an astonishing 89 out of 100, which categorizes it alongside foundational animal proteins like eggs and milk. And that is not the most anomalous discovery. In 2020, researchers at Ben-Gurion University published a finding that should have been biologically impossible. They identified bioactive vitamin B12 within Wolffia globosa. This was genuine vitamin B12, not the inert analogs sometimes found in algae. They validated this discovery using liquid chromatography and mass spectrometry, the undisputed gold standard for B12 detection. It is a biological axiom that plants do not produce vitamin B12. Only bacteria and archaea can synthesize it, which is the scientific reason vegans must rely on supplements. Yet, Wolffia globosa contains it. Approximately 2.5 micrograms per 100 grams of the dried plant. The secret resides within its tissues, where bacterial endophytes live. Wolffia has engineered a natural symbiosis with B12 producing bacteria. When you consume the plant, you also receive the vitamin. So, let us review the facts. We have a plant the size of a grain of sand that doubles its entire biomass every 2 days. Contains more protein by weight than soybeans. Offers a complete amino acid profile that rivals animal products. And provides bioactive vitamin B12 through a symbiotic partnership with bacteria. It was inevitable that NASA would take notice. In 2021, scientists at Italy's National Research Council initiated tests on Wolffia globosa, subjecting it to simulated microgravity environments for potential use in space agriculture. Their findings, published in scientific reports in 2024, confirmed the agency's hypothesis. Wolffia globosa's protein production remains stable even when subjected to altered gravity. Based on their projections, a daily ration of just 600 grams of fresh Wolffia would satisfy an adult astronaut's entire daily protein needs. Consider the implications. During a hypothetical mission to Mars, you could cultivate complete protein within water tanks, requiring nothing more than light, water, and recycled waste for nutrients. No soil would be needed, no voluminous grow chambers, no 90-day crop cycles, just microscopic organisms doubling every 48 hours, endlessly generating 45% protein. This is not a theoretical exercise. Wolffia globosa has already been integrated into NASA's bioregenerative life support systems research, chosen specifically for its unmatched growth rate and protein density. This brings us to the central question of our investigation. If this plant is a nearly perfect food source, why is it not feeding the earth? The answer, as it so often does, is found by following the money. In 1909, the German chemist Fritz Haber pioneered a method for synthesizing ammonia from atmospheric nitrogen and hydrogen. By 1913, his associate Carl Bosch had transformed this discovery into an industrial-scale reality. The Haber-Bosch process could literally pull nitrogen, fertilizer, out of thin air. Before 1913, global agriculture was dependent on natural nitrogen cycles, manure, compost, and crop rotation for millennia. Farmers understood that soil vitality relied on crop rotation, on nitrogen-fixing legumes, on diversity. The invention of the Haber-Bosch process fundamentally altered this reality. Suddenly, synthetic nitrogen could be applied to single-crop fields in perpetuity. The soil itself could be rendered inert, a lifeless medium, and yet harvests would continue so long as one applied more chemicals. By 1950, the global use of synthetic fertilizers had skyrocketed. By the year 2000, human industrial processes were fixing more atmospheric nitrogen than all natural land-based cycles combined. The chemical fertilizer sector had expanded into a $200 billion per year global empire, and Wolffia globosa represented an existential threat to its entire structure. Here is the reason. Wolffia does not require soil. It is an aquatic plant. It does not require fertilizer. Certainly not the industrial variety. It draws its nourishment directly from the water, metabolizing nitrogen and phosphorus from sources the chemical industry classifies as waste, agricultural runoff, municipal wastewater, even contaminated ponds. Scientific inquiries have demonstrated that Wolffia can extract up to 99% of nitrogen and 88% of phosphorus from polluted water, while at the same time generating edible protein. It transforms contamination into nutrition. But for the industry, there is a far more fundamental problem. Wolffia replicates by simple cell division. This is not a plant that requires seeds. It does not necessitate an annual purchase from a multinational seed corporation. It does not depend on patented genetic material. It requires only one microscopic plant and a vessel of water. 48 hours later, you possess 2 plants. 4 days later, you have 4. 1 week later, you have 8. The reproductive cycle for the most rapidly growing Wolffia species, Wolffia microscopica, is a mere 29 hours, establishing it as the fastest proliferating flowering plant ever recorded. Commencing with just 1 plant in ideal conditions, the resulting exponential growth curve is profoundly alarming to any entity seeking to control food systems. 1 becomes 2, 2 become 4, 4 become 8. By day 30, your population exceeds 1 billion plants. By day 60, it is greater than the number of stars in the Milky Way galaxy. This is not a plant that can be controlled. This is not a plant that can be patented. This is not a plant that demands yearly acquisitions of seeds, fertilizers, pesticides, or proprietary cultivation technologies. This is a plant that could flourish in containers on rooftops in Lagos, in community ponds in rural India, in water reclamation tanks, in refugee settlements entirely decentralized and utterly independent of the industrial agricultural paradigm. And that is precisely why its potential had to be methodically erased. The suppression was not explicit. There were no bans on duckweed. No legislation was passed against its cultivation. The agrochemical industry simply guaranteed that the entire infrastructure, all research funding, all agricultural advisory services, all government crop subsidy initiatives was oriented toward a single outcome: chemically addicted monoculture. When agriculturalists inquired about alternative protein crops, official agents recommended soybeans, which require industrial fertilizer. When governments allocated funds for agricultural science, that capital was funneled to institutions with deep financial connections to chemical corporations. When universities engineered new crop variants, their focus was exclusively on plants compatible with the pre-existing industrial model. Duckweed was incompatible. It would never be compatible. In Thailand, Laos, and Myanmar, the indigenous knowledge of Wolffia globosa stretches back for centuries. There, it is known as kainam, or water eggs. It is harvested from local ponds, integrated into stir-fries, and used to enrich soups. It is ordinary. It is sustenance. But in the Western world, duckweed was relegated to the category of pond scum. It was seen as nothing more than a film covering stagnant water, something a person would never consume. This cultural programming was insidious but highly effective. Americans were taught that protein originates from meat, from dairy, or perhaps from soybeans. It would never come from pond water. It would never come from a plant that grows wild, independent of human command. It would never come from something that is free. In the 1960s, NASA conducted brief studies on lemna duckweed for potential use in space. The project was abandoned because lemna species contain oxalic acid, which can contribute to the formation of kidney stones. The research was halted. The public story became, NASA investigated duckweed, and it proved unworkable. It was never mentioned that the Wolffia genus does not produce oxalic acid. It was never mentioned that NASA had simply researched the wrong plant. Decades of silence followed. Then, in 2018, an Israeli firm named Hinneman started marketing a specific strain of Wolffia globosa under the brand name Mankai. They funded and released peer-reviewed studies confirming its protein value. its complete amino acid profile, and its vitamin B12 content. They conducted clinical trials that verified its bioavailability in humans. The scientific case became irrefutable. Yet, introducing duckweed to Western consumers still required confronting 60 years of cultural bias and an entire food system engineered for chemical dependency. This is the reality they wish to obscure. The synthetic fertilizer industry generates no revenue when you cultivate protein in a bucket of water. Seed corporations do not turn a profit when a plant reproduces itself for free. Agribusiness conglomerates derive no advantage when the means of food production becomes genuinely decentralized. The whole of the industrialized food system the architecture of industrial agriculture is engineered for control, for dependency, for a cycle of recurring purchases. Wolffia globosa defies this system at a fundamental level. It grows without soil, without proprietary seeds, and without chemical inputs. Its biomass doubles every 48 hours. The protein it yields is complete, containing vitamin B12. It thrives in wastewater, in polluted catchments in water that would otherwise require millions of dollars for chemical treatment. This is not just a plant. It is a bioremediation engine that produces food. Let us examine the data. A potential yield of 100 tons of dry protein per hectare annually, a rate 28 times faster than conventional agriculture, achieved while simultaneously purifying contaminated water. For 60 years, the corporate entities that dictate global food policy, that control research funding, and that define what we eat, systematically ensured its suppression. But the paradigm is shifting. In 2021, the European Food Safety Authority officially classified Wolffia globosa as a novel food source. By 2024, peer-reviewed studies were published, confirming its potential for extraterrestrial agriculture. As climate instability undermines traditional farming, the search for alternatives has intensified, specifically for solutions that do not depend on arable land or chemical intervention. The organism that was once too efficient to be permitted is re-emerging from the shadows. The knowledge is now accessible. Mankai is available for purchase online. Cultures of Wolffia globosa can be ordered from aquatic suppliers, enabling cultivation in a simple container on a balcony. One can begin with a single plant and, within 60 days, theoretically generate more protein than a single person could consume in a lifetime. This is the core truth they sought to conceal. Earth's most efficient protein source is radically independent. It does not need their chemical fertilizers. It does not need their patented seeds. It does not need their industrial system. Its requirements are only water and sunlight. It has flourished in ponds and wetlands since long before humanity conceived of agriculture. The critical question is, with this knowledge now revealed, what action will be taken? Because every container of this plant cultivated on a rooftop becomes a quiet act of defiance against a global system that profits from engineered scarcity, dependency, and control. And this organism, this microscopic green sphere, smaller than a single grain of sand, may well be the most profound agricultural revolution you were never meant to discover. If this investigation has opened a new line of inquiry for you, subscribe to the channel and enable notifications. Every like and every share contributes to preserving the knowledge that was systematically buried. Some plants are too small to be seen. Some proteins are produced too quickly to be commodified. And some of the most powerful solutions have been floating in plain sight all along. Our next investigation begins soon.